Today on Women of Faith in Leadership, we're diving into a conversation that I believe will challenge and free so many of you. Because if you've ever felt like your value as a leader comes from how much you do, or even how much you carry, or how much you give to others, then this episode is going to speak right to your heart. Today, I'm joined by Kerry, a Christian life and well-being coach and the creator of the Balanced Life Blueprint. With over 2 decades of experience in education, ministry, and coaching, Kerry helps women move from burnout and striving into a life of clarity, peace, and God-given confidence. Not by doing more, but by realigning with who God says they are. In our conversation, we unpack the subtle but powerful lie that doing more pleases God, and how that belief can quietly lead to exhaustion, resentment, and burnout, even in the women who love Jesus deeply. We also talk about identity, boundaries, rhythms, and what it looks like to live and lead from a place of rest instead of pressure. This is a conversation that will gently shift how you see yourself and how you lead. I'm so grateful you're here. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Women of Faith in Leadership podcast, where faith and leadership come together. I'm Rika, Whelan, and each week you'll discover biblical wisdom and practical leadership strategies to help you lead with confidence and honor God in every area of your leadership. Let's get started. Welcome, Kerry, to the Women of Faith in Leadership podcast. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. Where are you joining us from today?
I am joining from the state of Florida in the U.S.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And why don't you tell the listeners about yourself? Who are you? Who's Kerry?
Who's Kerry? Well, I could say a lot about that, but I'll keep it brief. Like right now, I am basically a Christian life and well-being coach. And I work primarily with women who are struggling with burnout and help them to really kind of overcome that through really embracing their identity in God, in Christ, and then using that to, defeat expectations, to lean into their value as a human being, a creation of God, and then have that peace and that clarity and that confidence in their lives instead of the doing that really I think maybe all women do. I don't think I know any women who aren't very, very busy. And I always say, like, women don't have the luxury of doing one thing at a time. And so we are just, a busy people. I have been in the helping professions for 35 years. I can't believe it. I just said that. I was in education as a counselor. I've done that actually for 20 years. My husband and I also pastored a church in New York State for 15 years, and some of these things overlap. And I've been coaching now for about 13 years. So my heart's desire is to help people live, especially women, live the abundant life that Christ has promised us. And that's one big reason how I even got into this, and saw the need there. And so I would say that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I mean, that segues exactly into the topic that we're going to be talking about, which you basically already introduced. But how did you get into this space of burnout and helping women to step into, what it is that God really has for them?
Well, I did not come to know the Lord until I was 27 years old. And even before I was 27, I had already experienced burnout, and learned a lot from that, and vowed that I would never do that again, made some wiser decisions. But like usual, life happened. I did come to know the Lord, which was like the best thing in my life ever. And it changed many, many things. I'd like to say everything, but the truth is, I ended up in a season of burnout again. And a lot of it was because there were many, many things kind of out of my control. I literally, like, I have two children who have special needs. They're young adults now. At the same time I was raising them, my mom passed away actually a week before I had my daughter. My dad had a health crisis, and so it was just one thing after another. And I was pastoring with my husband and helping other women through their challenges. And so it was a lot. But what really surprised me was, coming from being, not knowing the Lord personally, and then coming into a relationship with him as an adult, and then being in ministry, I was surprised by the number of women who were still stressed, burned out, just literally exhausted, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And I think that, I mean, I was younger then, but I think I didn't really expect that. You know, I think the work I do now is really based on, John 10:10, where, the word says the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, but I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. And when I read that, it struck me like so deeply. Like, that is a promise from Christ for believers who are living on earth, the same earth he walked. We had the same struggles, but even in the midst of all of the things that can happen in our lives, we are promised abundant life. And I had just really, I mean, I just met and worked with a lot of miserable people, who were definitely not living abundantly. And I was one of those miserable people at one point in my life, so I really could relate. And I just felt really a pull to really help women find really their worth in Christ, and to not just read about it, but to really understand it and to embrace it. And because when we do that, it does change everything. We are human beings, we're not human doings, but we sometimes get that mixed up a bit.
And that's so true, because I think as female, I think from a young age we are taught, and I think it's unintentional by our parents or by our previous generation mums and grandmothers, that that's the role that we should play. And so and although in some sense I do agree, the mother is the nurturing figure in the household, looking after everyone. But the problem is that we carry that over to our workplaces, and we carry that over to everywhere else. And then the issue is that then we're this mother figure or this person who does everything for everyone except for ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. Like, when I think back to my life and my younger life, like, I can't like identify a time when that thinking began. Like, it was just part of who I was. I was a helper, I was a fixer, people came to me. And so that was my role for as long as I can remember. And you're absolutely right. I brought that into every part of my life. And we can be burned out at work for sure, especially I believe those in leadership. But we can, even if we're not in the workplace, we can be burned out no matter where we are really in life.
And that's exactly what I experienced as well. So I went from being everything at home to everyone to being everything at work for everyone.
And so my priorities actually shifted, and I'm very open and honest with those types of mistakes that I made. And during the 5 years when I was in that executive leadership role, I did put work above my family. And because I did that, tried to be everything for everyone, and because I really actually liked my job, I think that's the thing that got me under is the fact that I really liked my job and I wanted to do my best in that role because I really liked it.
Yeah.
But about 2 years in, my husband was already saying, "This is too much. Like, we can't deal with this as a family. It's too much. You're out of the home too much, and I can see it on you. You're exhausted all the time, which means that you're short of thread with the kids, and things like that." But I was like, nope, I am not leaving. I enjoy my work too much, and I stayed there for a full 5 years, and it was only really 6 months before I left that the penny dropped. And I was like, yeah, okay, this is not working anymore. And I still stayed there for 6 months because I had set myself up as everything for everyone, that I needed 6 months to let it go, to delegate to people, to set up the processes so that they could figure it out without me. So that was the biggest mistake I ever made. But so you learn, right?
Yes, hopefully. I always say we kind of we can win and not lose. We win and learn, and as long as we learn, we're winners. And then hopefully we bring that lesson and that wisdom into the rest of our lives.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So what, if I'm thinking now, there's a couple of people listening to the show right now and they're thinking, okay, well, I might be in that place. What are some signs for them to look out for to identify whether they're in that place at the moment where they are pushing themselves too much?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, there's not just one kind of list of signs. It does look different in different people, but there are some common things to really, I think, be aware of for ourselves. And I think one big one is that we're exhausted. And it's not an exhaustion that even if we got enough sleep, which we don't, but if we even got enough sleep, it doesn't fix it. It is a physical exhaustion, but it's coming from a deeper place. And so, like, sleep isn't the answer. So we're feeling exhausted. And a lot of times I think we may be resentful because many women who are feeling, stretched thin in that burnout, a lot of it is because they don't know how to, or they're not comfortable saying no, creating and then protecting some healthy boundaries. And because they're used to doing everything and being everything for everyone, and they, it comes from a good place and they don't want to disappoint others. And so what happens is they find themselves saying yes, oh sure, I'll help you, when they know darn well they don't really have the time to do anything. And then they start, feeling a bit crabby about it, and kind of resenting whatever it was they agreed to. And like you had mentioned it just a few minutes ago, we certainly, I would say, our patience becomes shorter and shorter, and because we're just running on empty. And it's hard to be understanding and be empathetic and caring when there's just nothing left inside. And, we've all heard the saying, I think, that you can't pour from an empty cup. And when we're empty, we need, and I work with women and I would tell them, oh, what are you going to do to, that's life-giving and that's refreshing. But then I wouldn't do it myself. And so, I had to learn how to take my own advice. So those are definitely some things. And I think like I remember even for myself, it was almost like I forgot how to laugh. Like I just took everything so seriously. Like I had a to-do list lots of things had to get checked off each day. I had a plan. I was a perfectionist, which didn't help. I kept to that plan. And if my plan got thwarted, I was not a very happy person. Um, but it was really like the joy was kind of sucked out of my days. And even things that I used to enjoy, I didn't find enjoyable because I didn't really have the time to make the time to really experience them, not just do it for the sake of doing it, but to be in the moment, as we're with a friend or as we're doing something fun or taking a walk, to really be present fully. Because typically we get up out of bed, and a lot of women tell me all the time, before their feet hit the floor, they're already thinking about all the things they have to do today.
Mm.
And then before they go to bed, they do that mental checklist, did I do all those things today? And I think they find that their to-do list gets longer and longer instead of shorter and shorter.
Yeah. And that to-do list, yeah, it was something that I always worked from a to-do list, but my to-do list was so long, like pages and pages long of things to do. And then I realized, especially in those 6 months before I left, I realized, why am I even doing all of this stuff? Like, why am I not trusting my assistant director to do that? Why am I not delegating this to somebody who I can trust? And so, I mean, over the 5 years, look, it's not that I had full control of everything. There was certainly some, like my leadership team had a role and the assistant director had a role, but I realized that I could have actually done more to empower them so that I could do less, not because I'm lazy, but just because I didn't need to do all of that stuff.
Sure.
So, yeah. And so that to-do list, I think, can be the biggest hurdle for some women to get over. And so I did hear something once from somebody else. I think it was way after I was out of that role. I did a time management course. Well, should have done that ages ago. But she basically said you are not allowed to have more than 5 things on your to-do list. And the hardest thing that you have to do, like the most difficult thing that you have been putting off for months or for days or whatever, that's the first thing you do in the morning, because that's actually when you have the most amount of energy. Whereas in the afternoon, after you've had lunch, you've had a couple of coffees, you start feeling really down, or like your body starts feeling like, okay, I need more energy. It's so tough to do things now. And so by the end of the day, when you come to the thing that you really should be doing, but you don't want to do and you've put it off, you're just going to put it off again to the next day.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. So eat that frog. That was another, eat that frog early in the morning.
Yes. Get it over with.
Yeah, just get it over and done with. So, but again, like, I think we burn ourselves out because we think of, like, for example, I'm just trying to think. One thing that I've always wanted to do, for example, in that 5-year period, was to come up with a employee like handbook, because we didn't have that. And so there were a lot of, obviously our onboarding process was, well, in my opinion, our onboarding process was great. There were so many things, but we never had an employee handbook that somebody could just go and reference if they needed to. And so in that 6 months, I made it my mission to come up with an employee handbook. Why me? Why did it have to be me? And that was a frog. Like, it was so huge. And eventually I realized, when the thing got to like 300 pages, I was like, okay, this is too much for me. I can't deal with this. I'm going to have to include my leadership team. I'm going to have to get my assistant director in. I'm going to have to get the admin in to help, because there's no way. Why am I doing this all by myself? So eventually I realized, okay, like, you don't have to do all of this stuff. And that's how we burn ourselves out, is because we want to leave a legacy. So, and I think the employee handbook for me was a legacy. I wanted to leave a legacy there. But legacy is so much more than that. Like an employee handbook, it's about the way I led them and about the way the leaders lead, more than anything else. So what is the legacy I left? Burn yourself out.
Yes.
So,
And And
Yeah.
I think also, like you touched upon it a little too, is, we take those things on, I think, often, which certainly contributes to our burnout because, we may not say it out loud, but in our mind, we don't think anybody's going to do it the way we would do it. And so
Exactly.
if we want it done
Perfectionism. Mm.
right, because we think our way is right, then we have to
Mm-hmm.
do it ourselves. And
Mm.
part of really a big hurdle, like you had mentioned that word, in overcoming burnout is letting go of some
Mm.
things. And one of them is, letting go of the idea that it all has to be your way. And, now I always say there's always more than one way to get to the same goal. And
Yeah.
so I might not have ever heard your way, but if it works, then, that would be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So we know the signs of burnout now. So, without giving it all away, because we can't do that on the show, but what strategies can these female Christian leaders start doing today and implementing today if they've realized after listening to our conversation that, oh, I think I'm in that burnout space and I think
Yeah.
I'm heading down that path?
Yeah. That's a wonderful question. And I think it comes how I look at burnout and what I do with my clients comes from my belief that burnout really isn't a time management problem. It's an identity problem. And we need to get to the root because our identity in Christ has to be solidified, embraced, and that we're willing to walk in it. And that means that we may or may not be doing some of the same things.
Mm.
But when we can really embrace that identity, it gives us, I think, then the freedom and the confidence to start to do other things, which may be like some of the work. Certainly, everything I do is grounded in the word. Because I think, especially as a woman of faith, if it's not grounded in the word, it's just good advice. And, the Lord's
Love that.
advice is the best. Nobody can do better. And so I use that certainly as, my manual, if you will. And one of the first things, though, we do is we look at, I call them the big rocks, the things you're going to put in your jar first if you're filling up a jar. Your big rocks, what are they? What do you value? What is truly most important in your life? And sometimes it is interesting. We say, oh, well, my family is very important, or, this is very important. And then I will often ask, my clients, and I'll say to them, well, let's take a look at your calendar. And if your calendar could talk, what would it say about you? And I can only ask that question, I feel, because someone asked that question of me, like in a different form. But when I looked at my calendar, it didn't line up with what I was saying was important. The things that I valued, my family, my faith, my walk with the Lord. And when I looked at my calendar, were those things showing up, or was I squeezing them in a few minutes?
Mm.
Um, and so we look at those big rocks, and that might be, our faith for sure, our family, our health. I had a major health crisis just a few years ago. And that is another story, but I'll just say this. If I had had that health crisis years ago before I did this work,
Mm.
I don't think I would have come out the same. It
Well.
was a very different experience, thankfully, because of kind of where I was as far
Mm.
as my walk with the Lord. And so we need to look at those things that are important. I also, ask my clients to look at, what are the things that bring you life?
Mm.
What do you do that's life-giving? And then on the flip side, what do you do that is life draining? And oftentimes life draining list is way longer than life giving. And so we, look at that, and the reasons why aren't we doing things, that bring us joy, and that, fill us up.
Mm.
And so those are some of the things that that I, work with them. And then also to, excuse me, sorry, I'm getting over a cold.
That's okay.
But to look at our, let's say, rhythms, is our walk with the Lord, is it something we're squeezing in? Is it, an afterthought?
Mm.
Is it joyful? Because that's where we're getting our, our energy, our focus, our being, our
Mhm.
identity, and our faith that's going to help us through everything. And if we're not intentional about it, then it often doesn't happen.
Mm.
And, I say, God's the same God at 9 a.m. as he is at
Mhm.
5 a.m. And
Love
so
that.
you don't have to get up at 5 in the morning to have a relationship with the Lord. He'll still be there at 8 or whatever time you get out of bed. Um, but what you do once you get out of bed is really the most important part.
Mm.
Is that a part of your daily rhythms, your routine? And how can you make it that, and not out of obligation,
Mm.
but really so that it fills you and it brings you joy. One of the things I just do for myself that, I just share with, the women I'm working with is I try to choose a particular like principle or, experience, and see how the people of the Bible, how they dealt with that experience,
Mm.
whether it's, courage or, trust or whatever. And I do like my own studies so that it's meaningful to me for where
Mm.
I am in life. And I think that's very, very important. And we need to have those routines that are doable. We don't need
Mm.
to spend an hour or 2 hours. I know that when my children were young, um, I I didn't have an hour. Like really, I didn't have an hour. I prayed in the car. I worshiped in the car with music. I prayed. That I got really good at the word when it says pray without ceasing. I mean, in those little snippets, those minutes here and there, that
Mm.
was sometimes my prayer time. But I
Mm.
was always talking with God.
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't an hour. Maybe if you added it all up at the end of the day, but it just wasn't possible because I was stretched thin, and those were some things that I didn't have control over, so they weren't going
Mm.
away. Um, and so I'd say that those are some big things. And then what we always want to do is to make the plan, and give I try to give each woman tools that they can use long after they're working with me. I try to kind of coach people into putting myself out of business, um, so that
Mm.
they can just continue to use those tools. I still do them every quarter of the year. I do like a 90-day reset,
Mm.
and I evaluate that quarter. I have a goal or two, maybe at the most, for that quarter. Did it happen? What are some celebrations? What are some challenges I had? Is it a goal that needs to continue because there's more work to be done? But it helps me to break down the year into doable pieces,
Mm.
because when
Mm.
I think about where do I want to be on December 31st of 2026, I don't really know. It's a little overwhelming to think about that. But where do I want to be on March 31st of
Mm. So much more
2026?
doable.
Yeah, it
Mm.
just it's like brings a lot of relief, like, oh yeah,
Mm.
I can do that. In 90 days, I can do that.
Mm. Yeah, I have a friend who introduced me to that, actually, the working in quarters, and that was actually a
Mhm.
very new concept to me. And I only learned it basically after I exited my corporate job, because I was always taught from the and this is something that I'm actually still sharing it on my show, is the if that is that annual vision that you have to have
Mhm.
for your year, and then you evaluate that at the end of the year. But to make it even more realistic, you should break that vision into quarters and say, okay,
Yes.
but how is that going to look like in this quarter, and then this quarter, and this quarter? And so I think it makes it so much better. I agree with you. Like I can now, and actually inadvertently I have been doing that. I realized it now, where I've been planning out, I mentioned before we started recording that, and
Mhm.
we're in the process of moving countries at the moment. And so all that I'm doing at the moment is I'm just planning out this quarter, because that's where I
Yes.
know it's predictable to me. After the next quarter, I don't know what it's going to look like. Am
Right.
I going to have my home studio set up? Am I going to have what's that all going to look like? Because
Mhm.
obviously
Yes.
looks a little bit different when you're in business versus in leadership. So yeah, that's actually really valuable. Thanks for sharing that, because I think as leaders we can get so in our head that we have to plan out the whole year, and we have to get it all done, not only for ourselves but for our employees as well. And then
Mhm.
inadvertently that burns us out too.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm,
Yes. Absolutely. And I think too, one of the things we do when we, look at bigger things and we take on too much, not intentionally,
mm,
but that really prevents us, I think, from being able to set healthy boundaries, because it's, when you say, oh my gosh, I have to be doing that, at
mm,
the end of the year. And if we
mm,
don't have a way to measure our progress, in smaller pieces, it's overwhelming. And so we'll say, oh yeah, maybe I need to do this, or maybe this will help, or that will help. And so we end up doing a little bit of everything often.
yeah.
And none of them really are taking us closer to our goals. And one of the things I tried to emphasize, with the women I'm working with too, is that boundaries aren't selfish. And
No.
it's not about keeping people out. I look at it as it's about protecting what God has entrusted to you. We've
Mm,
all been called for some purpose. The word
mm,
tells us that, and that there's a reason we're here. And even sometimes we have to learn to say no to something we might like, so that God can entrust us with something better. And for me, that was a really hard lesson, I think, to learn, is because I felt, and many women do, that the things that I were doing, they were important.
mm,
As I shared, I had some two children with special needs. There was a lot that went into that. Just the
mm,
structure in my home could be just,
mm,
enormous. People would come to our house because we were pastoring, and I had a sign, a little card before you left the house, before you walk out the door, do you have your backpack, your lunch, because otherwise I was driving to the school to drop everything off several times a day,
Oh, that's a
so
good
we
one.
had reminders. And
Mm,
I never said, okay guys, it's time to go. I would say, okay, in 15 minutes, we're moving to do this. In 10 minutes, this is what we're going to do. In 5 minutes, okay.
mm,
And, many people said, I don't think I could do that. I said, well, you
mm.
could if it was what your children needed. I
Exactly.
mean, did I do that before my children needed it? No, but that's
Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
needed. And it avoided meltdowns
Mm,
and, these mini crises, because they were crises in their lives.
mm,
And just by understanding their needs. But those things were good. Being in ministry, I was very involved in women's ministries, through our church, our local area, even the state of New York. And I loved it. but there came a time when it just became one of the things that the Lord was asking me to let go of so that he could really give me something else. And that was hard. It's hard to say no to things we like, especially when we don't really know what's going to replace it. We just have to trust that the Lord has something better for us.
Better.
And that's a hard place to be.
Yeah, I know exactly. I want to go back to what you were saying, and then I'll jump into this conversation, the second topic that you were talking about, the saying no. But getting back, I've got 3 kids with that are neurodiverse. So I've got 1 with autism and 2 with ADHD, and so I totally get you do what you need to do for them in the household. And so I think if it's possible for us to do it for our kids, why are we not doing it for ourselves? If we are putting these boundaries in place, and if we are putting these, because for example, we know if our middle one specifically, if she did not have a good morning, or if she did not have a good night last night, or if something like that, then we cancel our plans, because there's no way we're going to take her wherever she's going to go if she's had a bad morning, because we know that's not going to work out well for anybody, and nobody's going to have fun.
No, not
so
at all.
Yep, exactly. And so why are we not doing that for ourselves? If we we know that that's what works for our kids, because we know our kids well, then we should be doing that for ourselves as well. So I think, when you mentioned that, I was like, heck yes, we should be doing that for ourselves too. And I really like your idea of that thing against the door. I am 100% going to implement that, because the amount of times I've had to come back for shoes, my son is the worst for shoes. I have now told him, you are not allowed to leave the house without shoes. My other one, she freaks out if she doesn't have a water bottle, for example. So if I've had to drive back home for water bottles, because she's just so darn attached to that water bottle. As the other one, she's blasé. She'll just forget all her stuff at home and not care about it at all. She has ADHD, but she's like, I couldn't care less, or So I like that. Thank you. I'm gonna definitely implement that strategy. And then getting back to the saying no, where God says yes, it's a yes, and you say no. I think that's so tricky, because we just want to trust. We want to trust that God knows what he's talking about, but we are humans and we think we know best.
Absolutely. We do. That's gotten me into a lot of trouble. I'd like to say I learned, and I believe I did, but I think I learned the hard way. And I'm sure I could have done it in a much briefer period of time than it took me. But I guess the end result is I did finally learn to trust that his plans are way, way better than my plans could ever be. He's already in them. He's already there. He's already been.
He already knows them.
What's going to happen? Yeah.
Exactly.
And, hopefully we can learn to love ourselves. And I say, we need to know ourselves, like you're talking about, knowing our children, knowing ourselves. And I said, the only person really who knows me better than me is God. And he knows things about me that I haven't even discovered yet, because he created me.
Exactly.
And so why wouldn't he want the best for us? And so I think it's important to remind ourselves, especially when we're in a place where we need to trust, because trust is hard. But to remind ourselves of the goodness of God, and remind ourselves too of anything and everything he's brought us through. So, oh yes, he did it in that situation, and he did it in this. Why wouldn't he do it in this one?
Exactly.
As well?
Exactly. Yeah. So where can people connect with you, Kerry, after this conversation? Because I think there will be, and especially the women who might be close to where you are, or who want to work with you one-on-one, or how can they connect with you?
Sure. They can see me right on my website. It's www.coachkerry, and my name is the Irish version. It's Kerry. So coachkerry.com. I'm also, I think, on every social media platform. I do videos and write, little posts. And on each of them, I have a link to what I call is a free clarity call. And that's
Okay.
how I start connecting with anyone who may be interested in working with me. We get together. It doesn't cost them anything, but it's an opportunity for them to share what is happening in their lives, kind of where they are, where they want to go, what they want their life to look like. And, is this something that can be of help? Are we a good fit for each other? And, I always say I interview them kind of as they interview me, because we uncover and we unearth a lot of things. We go deep, and we need to be able to trust each other, and it has to be a safe space. So I do that intentionally, so people, won't hesitate to make that call if they feel that they would like to do that. And it costs them their time, and their honesty with themselves, really.
Okay, well, we'll make sure we add all the links in the show notes, so if people can connect with you as well. Most of our listeners do like to connect via LinkedIn, so I will I will do that. But anyway, we'll put all of them on there. I know Instagram's a favorite as well for for scrolling and time wasting when you've got nothing else to do.
That is true.
So true these days. Anyway, it was so lovely to connect with you, Kerry, and I look forward to our continuous connection in the future.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate you having me here on your podcast, and I hope that what I shared was helpful for your listeners.
Yeah, I'm sure it was, because a lot of them, and one reason why I started the podcast was that calling. That was a yes from God that I had to say, because I know that a lot of them are in the same headspace. They want to do and be the best, but that means that they're doing a bit too much sometimes.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to hopefully connecting with some of your listeners.
Yeah, definitely. Me too, for you. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts? It would mean so much to me to read your feedback. Also, it would really bless me big if you shared this episode with a fellow leader who might benefit from hearing today's message. And remember, put on the armor of God daily and walk by faith and not by sight. I'll meet you back on Monday for another episode.